Miles Hartwell pressed his credit card against the marble counter at exactly 3 p.m., and the cold from the granite seemed to travel through his fingertips straight into his chest. Outside the towering windows of the Drake Hotel lobby, October wind sliced across Lake Michigan, dragging sheets of freezing rain that blurred the Chicago skyline into watercolor smudges of gray and muted gold. The receptionist, a young woman named Amber, with tired eyes and a professional smile that didn't quite reach them, swiped his card twice before it finally went through. Miles felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. Money was always tight these days, even for someone who presented himself as a successful business consultant. "Room 1908, Mr. Hartwell," Amber said, sliding 2 keycards across the counter. Her voice was pleasant but distant, the kind of voice that had repeated the same script 1,000 times. 19th floor. Elevators are to your left. Checkout is at 11A.M. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Miles shook his head, pocketing one key card and holding the other between his thumb and forefinger. The plastic felt flimsy, almost weightless, and yet it carried the power to unlock doors, literally and figuratively. He glanced at his watch. 3:01 p.m. Plenty of time. The plan was simple, clean, foolproof. Get to the room, execute the task, be seen downstairs within minutes. Establish presence. Create the alibi. No one would ever know. What Miles didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, as he walked toward the elevators with his single carry-on bag slung over his shoulder, was that the next 7 minutes would unravel his entire life. That the bathtub in room 1908 was about to become the epicenter of a catastrophe that would expose secrets buried so deep, even that the people who created them had almost forgotten they existed. That a maintenance engineer named Claire Donovan would piece together a puzzle so intricate it would make national headlines, and that the elegant hotel around him, with its Art Deco chandeliers and polished brass fixtures, was not what it seemed. Nothing ever is. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Miles stepped inside, and the doors closed behind him like a curtain falling on the first act of a tragedy no one saw coming. 19 floors below, in the depths of the Drake's basement mechanical room, Claire Donovan wiped hydraulic fluid from her hands onto a rag that had long ago given up any pretense of being clean. She was 37 years old, built solid from years of manual labor, with dark hair pulled back in a perpetual ponytail and eyes that missed nothing. This hotel was her domain, every wire, every ancient boiler that groaned like a dying beast. She knew the Drake's secrets the way a surgeon knows the human body, intimately, without sentimentality, with respect for how quickly things could go catastrophically wrong. Her radio crackled. "Claire, we got a situation." It was Tommy, one of the newer maintenance guys, and his voice carried an edge of panic that made Claire's jaw tighten. "What kind of situation?" she asked, already moving toward the service elevator. 19th floor. Water, lots of it, coming through the ceiling of the 18th floor. Room below 1908. Claire's mind immediately began calculating. Water damage on the 18th floor meant a catastrophic failure somewhere in 1908. Bathtub overflow, burst pipe. The Drake's plumbing was nearly a century old in some sections, retrofitted dozens of times. A labyrinth of copper and steel that required constant vigilance. She'd warned management 6 months ago that certain rooms needed complete overhauls, but budget constraints had pushed those repairs into the indefinite future. The indefinite future, apparently, had arrived. "I'm on my way," she said into the radio, breaking into a jog. "Get towels, get the wet vac, and for God's sake, shut off the water to that wing if you can access the shut-off valve." The service elevator took forever. 60 seconds that felt like 600. Claire's mind raced through possibilities. contingencies, damage control protocols. Water was the enemy of everything in a hotel. Carpets, walls, electrical systems, guest belongings, reputation. The Drake wasn't just any hotel. It was a Chicago landmark, 100-year-old institution where celebrities stayed, where weddings happened, where people came to experience a piece of history. One flood could trigger insurance nightmares, lawsuits, terrible online reviews that would haunt them forever. The elevator doors opened on the 19th floor, and Claire immediately smelled it, that distinctive mineral scent of rushing water mixed with something chemical. Her boots squished on carpet that had turned into a sodden sponge. She rounded the corner toward room 1908 and saw Tommy standing outside the open door, his face pale. "It's bad, Claire. Real bad." She pushed past him into the room, and her breath caught. The bathroom looked like a bomb had gone off. The porcelain bathtub, an old cast-iron model that probably weighed 300 pounds, had cracked clean in half, and water was still pouring from the exposed pipes, creating a waterfall that cascaded across the tile floor, through the bathroom doorway, and into the main room. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the hole in the floor. Not a small crack, but a gaping wound, where water had apparently been flowing with such pressure and volume that it had compromised the structural integrity of the flooring itself. Through the hole, Claire could see straight down into the room below, room 1808, where ceiling tiles hung in soggy pieces and water dripped like rain. "Jesus Christ," Claire whispered. She'd seen plenty of plumbing disasters in her 12 years at the Drake, but never anything like this. This wasn't just a broken pipe. This was systematic destruction. She waded through the water. It was ankle-deep in places, and reached the shut-off valve behind the toilet. It took both hands and all her strength, but she finally got it turned. The waterfall slowed to a trickle, then stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the chaos, broken only by the steady drip, drip, drip of water finding new paths through the damaged structure. Tommy appeared in the doorway. "What the hell happened here?" "I don't know yet," Claire said, but her engineer's brain was already working, analyzing, reconstructing. She crouched next to the destroyed bathtub, careful not to cut herself on the jagged porcelain edges. Cast iron didn't just split like this. It required massive pressure or a significant structural flaw or both. She ran her fingers along the break line, feeling the rough texture, looking for any sign of what had initiated the failure. That's when she saw it. Wedged in the bathtub drain, partially obscured by porcelain debris, was a black box. It was small, maybe 3 inches square, and made of some kind of hard plastic or resin. It definitely didn't belong there. Claire carefully extracted it, her heart rate accelerating. The box was surprisingly heavy for its size, and it had what looked like electronic components visible through a transparent section on one side. "Tommy, go get me some evidence bags from the security office," she said without looking up, "and tell them we need to lock this room down. No one comes in or out without my say-so." "What is that thing?" "I have no idea, but someone put it there deliberately. This wasn't an accident." Those words hung in the water-logged air like a verdict. And in the security office, 17 floors below, a recording showed that a man named Miles Hartwell had checked into room 1908 at exactly 3 p.m. By 3:07 p.m., he was visible on lobby cameras, purchasing a coffee from the ground floor cafe, smiling at the barista, looking completely relaxed. 7 minutes. An impossible timeline for anyone to get to the 19th floor, sabotage a bathtub, and return to the lobby without being detected on any of the elevator cameras or stairwell sensors. An impossible timeline. A perfect alibi. And the beginning of a mystery that would prove that sometimes the truth is buried so deep beneath the surface, You have to break everything apart just to find it. If you've ever felt like the world around you operates on lies so polished they look like truth, you're not alone. Stories like this one remind us that appearances can be devastatingly deceptive. Before we dive deeper into what really happened at the Drake Hotel, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Real stories like these need to reach people who understand that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Now, back to the unraveling mystery that would change everything for everyone involved. By 3:15 p.m., Sloane Whitaker knew something had gone wrong. She sat in her office on the third floor of the Drakan office that was more of a glass cage than a private space, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the administrative wing, and her hands trembled as she refreshed the email on her computer screen for the fourth time in 2 minutes. The message she was waiting for hadn't arrived. The confirmation, the all-clear signal, the simple coded phrase that would tell her the plan had executed smoothly and she could finally breathe again. Instead, her desk phone rang. The caller ID showed maintenance. Sloane closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, gathering herself, forcing her face into a mask of professional calm. Then she picked up. Whitaker speaking. Miss Whitaker, this is Claire Donovan from engineering. We have a significant situation on the 19th floor, room 1908. Major water damage, structural compromise, and evidence of possible sabotage. I need to speak with you immediately. The word sabotage made Sloane's stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. She swallowed hard, tasting bile. I'll be right down, she said, her voice steady, despite the panic clawing at her throat. Give me 5 minutes. She hung up and sat very still, her mind racing through calculations, contingencies, ways to contain this. Sloane Whitaker was 43 years old, divorced, childless by choice, and had worked her way up from assistant manager to director of finance through sheer competence and ruthless efficiency. She was good at her job. She was good at solving problems. But this problem, the problem that had seemed so simple, so clean, so necessary 3 months ago, was metastasizing into something uncontrollable. She reached for her cell phone and typed a text message. Emergency. 1908 compromised. What do I do? The response came within seconds. Stay calm. Say nothing. I'll handle it. Sloane stared at those words. I'll handle it, and felt a cold fury rise in her chest. This was supposed to be handled already. This was supposed to be invisible, untraceable, a problem erased without anyone noticing there had ever been a problem in the first place. Instead, maintenance was talking about sabotage, which meant evidence, which meant investigations, which meant everything she'd worked for, everything she'd protected, was about to be ripped open and examined under the harshest possible light. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the elevator with the practiced poise of someone who had nothing to hide. But inside, every nerve in her body was screaming. In the basement, Claire had laid out the black box on her workbench under the harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look vaguely autopsy-like. Tommy stood beside her, and they'd been joined by Marcus Chun, the hotel's head of security, a former Chicago PD detective who'd taken early retirement after a shooting incident that left him with a permanent limp and a deep distrust of simple explanations. Marcus picked up the box carefully, turning it over in his gloved hands. This is a flow switch, he said after a moment. Industrial grade. You see these in HVAC systems, chemical plants, anywhere you need to monitor or control liquid flow. Claire frowned. What would it be doing in a bathtub drain? That's the question, isn't it? Marcus set the device down and pulled out his phone, snapping several photographs from different angles. But here's what I'm thinking. This isn't a monitoring device. Look at these wires. They're connected to what looks like a small pneumatic actuator. Whoever put this here wasn't measuring flow. They were controlling it. Or more specifically, they were triggering something when water flow reached a certain threshold. Triggering what? Marcus gestured toward the destroyed bathtub, visible through his phone's photo app. My guess? An overload? You run water, it hits this device, the actuator engages, and suddenly you've got a pressure surge that the old pipes can't handle. The bathtub takes the brunt of it, because that's where the weakest point is. Cast iron that's been subjected to decades of temperature changes, mineral deposits, microfractures. One big surge, and boom, catastrophic failure. Claire felt her engineer's mind catching up, filling in the terrible logic. Someone engineered this. They knew exactly what would happen. They turned the bathtub into a bomb on a timer. Not just a timer, Marcus corrected, a trigger. Someone had to run the water for this to activate, which means someone had access to that room between when housekeeping cleaned it at 2 p.m. and when the disaster happened around 3:10. Tommy, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat nervously. The guest, Miles Hartwell, he checked in at 3. Marcus nodded slowly. Pull the footage. I want to see every second from the moment he entered the building until the moment that bathtub exploded. 2 hours later, they were all crammed into the security office. Claire, Marcus, Tommy, and now Sloane Whitaker, who sat very straight in a chair near the door, her face carefully neutral. On the monitor, security footage played out with the cold objectivity of recorded truth. 3 hours 0 minutes and 3 seconds p.m. Miles Hartwell approaches the front desk. He's tall, mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit that doesn't quite fit right, like he bought it on sale and never had it tailored. His hair is graying at the temples. He looks tired but composed. 3 hours 0 minutes and 47 seconds p.m. Transaction complete. Miles pockets the key card and turns toward the elevators. 3 hours 1 minute and 12 seconds p.m. Miles enters elevator 3. The doors close. 3 hours 1 minute and 58 seconds p.m. Miles exits on the 19th floor. The camera at the elevator bank catches him walking left toward the odd-numbered rooms. His stride is purposeful but not rushed. 3 hours 2 minutes and 14 seconds p.m. Miles disappears from the hallway camera's view as he presumably enters room 1908, and then nothing for 4 minutes and 53 seconds. Miles Hartwell exists in a blind spot, inside a room where catastrophic sabotage was either being set up or had already been set up before his arrival. 3 hours 7 minutes and 7 seconds p.m. A figure appears on the lobby camera near the ground floor cafe. It's Miles, same suit, same build. He orders a coffee, exchanges a few words with the barista, a young woman named Jen, who later confirms he seemed totally normal, maybe a little distracted, and pays with a credit card. The timestamp on the receipt matches the video. 3 hours 7 minutes and 19 seconds p.m. Marcus paused the footage. So here's what we know. The bathtub failed approximately 3:10. Claire, you got the call at 3:12. By that time, water had been flowing hard enough to compromise the floor, which means it had been going for at least a few minutes. Let's say the triggering event, someone running the bathwater, happened around 3:05, give or take. But Miles is on camera buying coffee at 3-0-7, Tommy pointed out. How does he get from the 19th floor to the lobby in 2 minutes? He doesn't, Claire said quietly. It's impossible. I've timed it. Even if you sprint down the stairs, which would be caught on the stairwell cameras, and I've checked, and there's nothing. Even if you sprint, you can't make that trip in under 4 minutes. Not with 19 floors. Sloane Whitaker spoke for the first time, her voice measured and calm. So either our timestamps are wrong, or Miles's Hartwell didn't trigger the device. He's a guest who happened to check into a compromised room. Marcus turned to look at her. his detective's instincts pinging on something in her tone. Too calm, too prepared. That's one interpretation. Here's another. Someone is covering for him. Or he's covering for someone. Or ... He let the sentence hang, watching Sloane's face for any flicker of reaction. She gave him nothing. Sloane had spent years perfecting the art of revealing only what she wanted people to see. Or what, Marcus? Or the alibi was manufactured. Someone else used his card to buy that coffee. Someone who looked similar enough not to raise questions. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Claire leaned forward, studying the grainy footage of Miles at the cafe. Can we enhance this? Get a better look at his face. Marcus was already typing. The security system at the Drake was one of the few things Sloane had fought for and won in last year's budget. Within seconds he had a zoomed, clarified image of the man buying coffee at 3:07 p.m. It was definitely Miles. Same facial structure, same hair, same suit. But Claire noticed something that made her pulse quicken. His tie. Look at his tie. At 3 p.m., checking in, Miles had worn a burgundy tie with a subtle diagonal stripe. At 3:07 p.m., buying coffee, his tie was navy blue, solid color. People don't change ties in 7 minutes, Claire said. Not unless they're going to a formal event, and definitely not in the middle of checking into a hotel room. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just scented blood. No, they don't, which means this isn't Miles Hartwell buying coffee. This is someone pretending to be Miles Hartwell. Someone with his card, wearing similar clothes, establishing an alibi, while the real Miles does. What? Something on the 19th floor that he can't be seen doing. Sloane's phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it, but Claire saw the way her hand twitched toward it instinctively, then stopped. A tell, a crack in the porcelain. Miss Whittaker, Marcus said, his tone shifting into something harder, more cop-like. I need to know about the room directly below 1908. Room 1808. What's in there? It's a standard guest room, currently occupied by... Sloane pulled up the information on her tablet, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. A couple from Indiana, the Johnsons, celebrating their 30th anniversary, and above the ceiling of 1808, in the space between floors. Sloane's fingers stopped moving, just for a fraction of a second, but Claire caught it. I have no idea, Sloane said. It's just... infrastructure. Pipes, wiring, the usual. The usual, Marcus repeated. Okay, then you won't mind if Claire and I take a look, because the water damage in 1808 was concentrated in one corner of the room, the northeast corner, which suggests whatever that water was flowing toward, it hit something specific, something that absorbed a lot of the initial flood and then gave way. We'll need to relocate the guests, Sloane said. Compensate them, obviously, for the inconvenience. Already done, Marcus replied. I moved them 2 hours ago. They're in 2115 now, with a complimentary upgrade and a credit for the dining room. Very understanding people, actually, said these things happen. The unspoken message was clear. Marcus had anticipated the need to access that room. He'd been thinking steps ahead, and Sloane was slowly, inexorably, being boxed into a corner. 30 minutes later, Claire stood in room 1808, staring up at the water-stained ceiling with a flashlight in one hand and a growing sense of dread in her chest. Marcus was beside her, and Tommy had brought a ladder from the maintenance closet. The room smelled of dampness and mildew, that specific scent of water where it doesn't belong, destroying things that were never meant to get wet. Claire climbed the ladder, carefully, pushing aside the soggy ceiling tiles. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the interstitial space, revealing a tangle of old pipes, electrical conduits wrapped in crumbling insulation, and decades of accumulated dust that had turned to mud from the flood. And there, in the northeast corner, exactly where Marcus had predicted, was a safe. Not a modern safe, not a guest room safe. This was an old model, maybe from the 1940s or 50s, built into the structure itself during construction or a major renovation. It was roughly 2 feet square, with a combination dial that had, long ago, lost any shine, and it was bolted to a support beam that ran between the floors. The water had hit it straight on, flooding around it, and the pressure had apparently compromised some kind of seal or gasket, because the door hung slightly ajar. "Claire," Marcus's voice came from below. "What do you see?" "A safe," she said, her voice tight. "An old one, hidden in the ceiling space. And it's been opened or forced open by the water pressure. Can you reach it?" Claire stretched, her fingers just barely touching the metal surface. It was cold and slick with moisture. She got a better grip on the ladder, climbed 1 rung higher, which put her in a precarious position, half standing on the top step, with her head and shoulders completely through the ceiling, and managed to grasp the safe door. She pulled it open fully. Inside were papers, dozens of them, now soaked and fragile but still legible. Claire carefully extracted a few, bringing them down into the light of the room below. Marcus took them from her with gloved hands, spreading them out on the bed. They were contracts, legal documents with the Drake Hotel's letterhead, dated over the past 5 years, sale agreements, vendor contracts, service agreements. But as Marcus examined them more closely, his frown deepened. "These aren't right," he said slowly. "Look at this one. It's a catering contract with a company called Meridian Events. 5-year exclusive agreement signed 3 years ago. But I know for a fact we don't use Meridian Events. We use Chicago Premier Catering. I've seen their trucks here dozens of times." Claire came down from the ladder, wiping her hands on her jeans. "So these are fake contracts. Not fake, more like ghost contracts. Contracts that exist on paper, but not in reality." Marcus looked up at Sloane's contact information on his phone, then at the documents, then at Claire. "This is fraud, financial fraud. Someone created these contracts to show revenue or expenses that don't actually exist. Money laundering, maybe, or cooking the books to hide financial problems. And someone hid them in a safe in the ceiling," Claire added, the pieces clicking into place in her mind with horrible clarity. "Because they couldn't be destroyed. They might be needed for audits or legal purposes, but they couldn't be kept anywhere accessible. So they were hidden, invisible, until a sabotaged bathtub flooded this exact spot and forced the safe open." Marcus finished. He pulled out his phone. "I need to make some calls. This is way beyond hotel security now. This is FBI territory." Claire walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The rain had stopped, and weak afternoon sunlight was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the buildings in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere in this hotel, someone had orchestrated an incredibly elaborate scheme. Someone had planted a device in a bathtub, triggered a controlled disaster, created an alibi for a guest who might or might not be involved, all to, what? Destroy evidence, expose it, force the safe open, and make it look like an accident. Her mind drifted back to the elevator. The lobby footage had shown Miles taking Elevator 3 at 3:01 p.m., but there was something she'd noticed in the maintenance logs that morning, something that had seemed minor at the time but now felt significant. Elevator 5 had experienced a mechanical issue at 3:05 p.m. It had stopped on the top floor, the 24th floor, and maintenance had logged a service call. But when Tommy went to check it at 3:20 p.m., the elevator was functioning perfectly. No one had reported being stuck. The call had been logged as a false alarm, a glitch in the monitoring system, except Claire didn't believe in glitches. Not when they happened at exactly the right time to be useful. "Marcus," she said, turning from the window, "what's on the 24th floor?" He looked up from his phone. "Mechanical rooms mostly. HVAC control, water pumps, elevator machinery." "Why?" "Because elevator 5 stopped there at 3:05 p.m., right in the middle of our window, and I don't think it was an accident." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "You think someone was using the elevator shaft?" "I think someone was using the access panels in the elevator shaft. There are technical access points on every floor, including interior access that lets you move between floors without being seen by any cameras in the hallways or stairwells." Claire grabbed her toolkit. "If someone wanted to get from the 19th floor to the lobby in under 2 minutes without being detected, they couldn't use the stairs or elevators, but they could use the service shaft. And if they wanted to cover their tracks, they could trigger a false alarm on another elevator to distract maintenance and create confusion about the timeline." Implications were staggering. This wasn't a simple case of sabotage. This was a meticulously planned operation, with multiple moving parts, backup plans, and a level of inside knowledge that made Claire's skin crawl. Marcus and Claire took the service elevator to the 24th floor, and the ride felt interminable, despite lasting less than 90 seconds. Claire's mind was racing, reconstructing the crime, because that's what it was now, a crime, not just a maintenance disaster, in reverse chronological order. The elevator chimed softly as they reached the top floor, and the doors opened onto a dimly lit corridor that smelled of machine oil and stale air. The mechanical rooms were a maze of steel doors and warning signs. "Authorized personnel only. High voltage, confined space entry protocol required." Claire had been up here dozens of times, but always in daylight, always with a specific repair task in mind. Now, in the late afternoon shadows, with Marcus beside her, and the weight of conspiracy pressing down like atmospheric pressure, everything felt different, dangerous. "The elevator shaft access should be through here," Claire said, leading him past the main HVAC unit, a behemoth of metal and humming machinery that controlled the climate for the entire hotel. Toward a smaller door marked Elevator Machinery Room. She pulled out her master key, but when she tried the door it swung open, unlocked. Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward where his service weapon used to sit before retirement. The gesture was automatic, muscle memory from 20 years on the force, and when his fingers found only empty air, his jaw clenched. That door should be locked at all times. Fire code, safety regulations. Yes, Claire agreed quietly. It should be. They entered the elevator machinery room, and the noise was immediately overwhelming. The grinding of gears, the whoosh of cables moving through pulleys, the electric hum of motors that kept 6 elevators running constantly. But beneath those expected sounds, Claire's trained ear detected something else. A metallic scraping, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone was in the shaft. Marcus heard it too. He held up one hand, signaling Claire to stay back, and moved toward the access panel that led directly into the elevator shaft. It was a steel hatch, maybe 3 feet square, designed to let maintenance workers access the cables and mechanisms when elevators needed service. This hatch, like the door, was supposed to be locked. It wasn't. It stood slightly ajar, and through the gap, Claire could see the vertical darkness of the shaft stretching down 24 floors to the basement. The scraping sound stopped abruptly. "I know you're in there," Marcus called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades dealing with people in situations they desperately wanted to escape. "This is hotel security. Come out slowly with your hands visible." Silence. The elevator machinery continued its mechanical symphony, but the human sound had ceased. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about Miles Hartwell, about the fake alibi, about the bathtub bomb, about those contracts hidden in a ceiling safe for years. She thought about Sloane Whitaker's too calm demeanor and the text message she'd tried to hide. Pieces of a puzzle were arranging themselves in her mind, but the picture they formed was still incomplete, still terrifying in its implications. Then, from inside the shaft, a voice, "I'm coming out. Don't shoot." The hatch opened wider, and a man emerged. Not Miles Hartwell, but someone Claire recognized from the hotel staff. David Reese. He worked in guest services, a quiet guy in his late 20s who'd been with the Drake for maybe 2 years. He was covered in grime, his white shirt stained with grease and dust, and his hands were shaking as he raised them above his head. "David?" Claire couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "What the hell are you doing in the elevator shaft?" "I was told to check for damage," David said, but his voice was too high, too fast. The words tumbling out like a rehearsed script delivered by someone who'd forgotten half the lines. "After the water problem, I was checking to make sure nothing had compromised the elevator systems." Marcus stepped forward, and despite the limp from his old injury, he moved with predatory precision. "Try again. And this time, tell me why you were in an elevator shaft that has nothing to do with water damage, during a time when you should have been working your shift downstairs, and why this access hatch was conveniently unlocked." David's face crumbled. He was young, Claire realized. Young and scared, and in way over his head. His hands came down slowly, and he sagged against the wall like a puppet with cut strings. "I was just doing what I was told," he whispered. "I didn't know anyone would get hurt. I didn't know about the bathtub. I swear to God, I didn't know." "What were you told to do?" Marcus's voice was softer now, not kind, but gentler. The tone of someone trying to coax truth from someone terrified of the consequences of telling it. "To take his card, Mr. Hartwell's, when he checked in. Miss Whitaker gave me his description, told me he'd be arriving at 3, said I needed to watch for when he got to his room, then go to the lobby and buy something with his card. Established that he was downstairs. She said it was for insurance purposes. Something about protecting the hotel from a liability claim." David's words came faster now, a confession gaining momentum. "She gave me clothes to wear, similar to his suit. Said I just needed to be seen on camera for a few seconds, and that's all. I thought it was weird, but Miss Whitaker is my boss's boss, and she offered me $2,000 cash, and I've got student loans, and my mum's sick, and I just did it." Claire felt her stomach turn over. Sloane Whitaker had orchestrated the alibi. She'd recruited a low-level employee, exploited his financial desperation, and created a false timeline that made Miles Hartwell appear innocent of whatever had happened in room 1908, which meant Sloane knew what was going to happen. She'd been part of the plan from the beginning. "Where's Miles Hartwell now?" Marcus demanded. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. After I bought the coffee, I came back upstairs to return his key card. I was supposed to slip it under his door, but when I got to the 19th floor, there were people everywhere, maintenance crews, and I panicked. Miss Whitaker texted me to get out of sight, so I came up here. I'd been hiding in the shaft, trying to figure out what to do." David's eyes were red-rimmed, brimming with tears. "Am I going to jail?" "That depends on what else you know," Marcus said. "Did Miss Whitaker tell you why she needed the alibi? Did she mention anything about her safe, about documents, about money?" David shook his head. "No, nothing. Just the alibi, I thought. I don't know what I thought. That maybe Mr. Hartwell was important, someone famous who needed privacy. I didn't think it was illegal. I'm so stupid. I'm so incredibly stupid." Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in low tones that Claire couldn't quite hear over the machinery noise. She turned away, her mind churning. If Sloane had arranged the alibi, that meant she and Miles were working together. But toward what end? The contracts in the safe were evidence of financial fraud, but flooding a bathtub to expose them seemed like the most convoluted, risky method possible. Why not just destroy the contracts? Why not take them out of the safe and burn them, unless someone wanted them found? Unless the entire disaster was designed not to hide evidence, but to reveal it in a way that looked accidental, unintentional, beyond anyone's control. A whistleblower, Claire thought. Someone inside the Drake wanted those contracts discovered, but they couldn't just hand them over to authorities without implicating themselves or putting themselves in danger. So they created a catastrophe that would force the safe open, expose the documents, and give them plausible deniability. But who? Miles, Sloan, someone else entirely. Marcus finished his call and turned back to David. Chicago PD is on the way. You're going to tell them everything you told us, and if you're smart, you'll cooperate fully. Maybe you get charged with conspiracy. Maybe you get a deal for testifying. That's not my decision anymore. But kid, you need to understand something. You helped someone commit what could be insurance fraud, evidence tampering, and God knows what else. The woman who paid you $2,000. She's going to throw you under the bus the first chance she gets. Your only way out is to tell the complete truth before she has a chance to spin this. David nodded miserably, and Claire almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But her sympathy was tempered by the memory of the destroyed bathtub, the flooded rooms, the hole in the floor that could have caused serious structural damage or injured someone if they'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Claire, Marcus said, I need you to check the elevator logs. Every elevator in this building. I want to know every stop, every call, every time someone pushed a button between 3 p.m. and 3:30. Can you do that? Yes. The system keeps records for 60 days. I can pull them from the main server in the basement. Do it. I'll stay here with David until the police arrive. Claire took the stairs down. She didn't trust the elevators right now. Didn't trust anything mechanical in this building because it had all become potential evidence, potential tools in a conspiracy she still didn't fully understand. Her legs burned by the time she reached the basement. 24 floors of concrete and fluorescent lighting, but the physical pain was almost welcome. It gave us something to focus on besides the growing certainty that the Drake Hotel, the place she'd worked for 12 years, the place she'd thought she knew intimately, was built on lies. The server room was climate-controlled and silent, except for the whisper of cooling fans. Claire logged into the elevator monitoring system and began pulling data, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The records appeared on screen in neat columns: timestamps, elevator numbers, floor calls, duration of stops. Elevator 3 to 3 hours, 1 minute and 12 seconds p.m. Called to lobby, traveled to floor 19. Doors opened 3 hours 1 minute and 58 seconds p.m. that matched the security footage. Miles entering, riding up, exiting on the 19th floor. But then she saw something that made her breath catch. Elevator 3 to 3 hours, 3 minutes and 47 seconds p.m. Called from floor 19, traveled to lobby. Doors opened 3 hours 4 minutes and 21 seconds p.m. Someone had called an elevator from the 19th floor less than 2 minutes after Miles got to his room, and that elevator had gone directly to the lobby, arriving at 3 hours 4 minutes and 21 seconds, which gave someone approximately 2.5 minutes to get into position before David Reese appeared on camera at 3:07 buying coffee. But here's what made Claire's pulse race. Elevator 3's log showed doors opening on the lobby level at 3 hours 4 minutes and 21 seconds, but the security camera footage showed no one exiting. Marcus had shown her the lobby feed, and there was no mysterious figure, no Miles Hartwell, no one at all coming out of Elevator 3 at that time. which meant someone had called the elevator, ridden it down, and exited somewhere that wasn't the lobby. Claire checked the log more carefully. Elevator 3 had made a brief stop, only 6 seconds, at the basement level before continuing to the lobby. A stop so quick it could have been accidental, someone pressing the wrong button and immediately correcting, or it could have been someone getting off in the basement, where there were no security cameras, because it was supposed to be employee-only access. She grabbed her radio. "Marcus, I found something. Someone took elevator 3 from 19 to the basement at 3:04. Not the lobby. The basement. They got off down here." Marcus's voice crackled back. "The basement is right below the lobby. They could have used the service stairs to get up one level and been in position for the coffee purchase." "Exactly. And there's more." Claire was scrolling through additional records now, her engineer's mind making connections. Elevator 5, the one that supposedly malfunctioned at 3:05 on the 24th floor. It wasn't a malfunction. Someone manually engaged the emergency stop from inside the elevator. The logs show the stop button was pressed, held for 90 seconds, then released. That's not a mechanical failure. That's deliberate. So while David was setting up the alibi in the lobby, someone else was in elevator 5 creating a distraction, or accessing the shaft, Claire said. When an elevator is in emergency stop mode, the shaft access hatches can be opened from inside without triggering alarms. It's a safety feature in case someone gets trapped. Whoever was in that elevator could have opened the hatch, climbed out into the shaft, and accessed any floor they wanted through the internal service ladders. The picture was becoming clearer, more horrifying in its complexity. This wasn't a two-person operation. This was coordinated, with multiple people playing specific roles, creating layers of confusion and misdirection. Miles in room 1908, doing ... something. David creating a false alibi. A third person using the elevator shaft as a hidden passage. And Sloane Whitaker orchestrating everything from her office, pulling strings, sending text messages, ensuring each piece fell into place. But why? What was worth this level of risk and planning? Claire thought about the contracts in the safe. Ghost contracts showing revenue that didn't exist. Money flowing into the Drake's accounts from services never rendered. Vendors who were probably shell companies, agreements that existed only on paper. Over 5 years, the logs Marcus had seen suggested millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions. Someone was embezzling from the Drake Hotel, or someone had been covering up the fact that Drake was in financial trouble so severe that only fictional revenue could make the books balance. And those contracts were evidence of felony-level fraud. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop investigating. You don't understand what you're risking." Claire stared at the message, her mouth going dry. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was getting close to the truth. Someone was scared enough to threaten her, which meant she was on the right track. She took a screenshot of the text and forwarded it to Marcus, then typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "A friend trying to save your life. The Drake is drowning in debt. Those contracts were the only thing keeping us from bankruptcy. If the truth comes out, 300 people lose their jobs. Is that what you want?" Claire's hands trembled as she read the words. 300 employees. People like her, like Tommy, like the housekeepers and cooks and front desk staff who depended on the Drake for their livelihoods. People with families, mortgages, kids in college. People whose lives would be destroyed if the hotel went under. But fraud was fraud, lies were lies. And someone had sabotaged a bathtub, created a dangerous flood, and put guests at risk to either expose or protect those lies. She typed, "Who are you?" No response. The 3 dots indicating typing appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then check the 24th floor maintenance room. Northeast corner. Behind the old boiler. You'll understand everything. The message thread went dead. Claire tried calling the number, but it rang once and went to a generic voicemail. She looked at the time, 5:47 p.m., nearly 3 hours since the bathtub had exploded, and she felt like she'd aged 3 years. She climbed the stairs again, 24 floors, her legs screaming in protest, her lungs burning. By the time she reached the top, Marcus had handed David Reese over to 2 uniformed Chicago PD officers, and he stood waiting for her, his face grim. "Got your message about the text," he said. "Any idea who sent it?" "Someone who knows about the contracts. Someone who wants me to find something behind the boiler." Claire led him back into the machinery room, past the grinding elevators, into the deeper reaches, where the oldest equipment from the Drake's century-long history still operated. The boiler in question was a massive cast-iron relic from the 1950s, probably kept as backup during the coldest winter days. Behind it, barely visible in the shadows, was a gap between the boiler and the wall. Claire squeezed into the space, her flashlight beam cutting through decades of accumulated dust and cobwebs. And there, wedged between pipes and sitting on a ledge that had probably never been cleaned since the hotel was built, was a laptop. An old model, maybe 5 or 6 years outdated, covered in dust, but intact. Claire carefully extracted it, cradling it like the explosive evidence it potentially was. Back in the light, she and Marcus examined it. There was a sticky note on the closed lid, the writing faded, but still legible. Password, Drake 1929 opening year. Marcus pulled out an evidence bag, but Claire stopped him. "If we bag it now, we lose chain of custody for whatever's on here. And if this is what I think it is, we need to know immediately, not 3 weeks from now, after it's been processed through police bureaucracy." He hesitated, then nodded. "You didn't hear this from me, but you're right. Open it." The laptop powered on with a laborious whir, the screen glowing to life with the welcome screen of an operating system that was several versions out of date. Claire entered the password, and the desktop appeared. It was sparse, no personal files, no photos, nothing except 3 folders labeled simply Contracts, Correspondence, Evidence. Claire opened Contracts first. Inside were digital copies of every document they'd found in the ceiling safe, plus dozens more. Fake invoices, forged signatures, bank statements showing wire transfers to shell companies with innocuous names like Midwest Services LLC and Great Lakes Consulting Group. The amounts were staggering, over $15 million over a 5-year period. But the correspondence folder was even more damning. Emails between Sloan Whitaker and someone named J. Brennan, mails discussing the scheme explicitly, coldly, as if embezzling millions from a historic hotel was just another business decision. "Sloan, we need another $2 million by Q3, or the auditors will notice the gap." J. Brennan, create a facilities contract, roof repairs, something big enough to justify the amount. Sloan, too risky. We've already got 6 fake facilities contracts this year. J. Brennan, then you'll figure it out. I'm not the one with accounting access. The exchange went on, stretching back years, showing a pattern of systematic theft disguised as legitimate business expenses. But here's what made Claire's blood run cold. The evidence folder contained documentation proving that J. Brennan was James Brennan, CEO of Drake Holdings, LLC, the investment company that owned the Drake Hotel. The person stealing money from the Drake wasn't some external criminal. It was the owner himself, siphoning funds from his own property, and Sloan Whitaker had been his accomplice, creating the paperwork that made the theft look legitimate. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed, reading over her shoulder. "This is corporate fraud at the highest level." Brennan was bleeding the Drake dry, probably planning to let it fail, collect insurance money, and walk away clean. But someone found out, Claire said, her mind racing. Someone discovered this laptop, discovered the evidence, and instead of going to the police directly, which might have made them a target, they created a scenario where the evidence would be found accidentally. The bathtub bomb wasn't meant to destroy anything. It was meant to flood the safe, expose the contracts, and force an investigation that would inevitably lead here, to this laptop, to the complete proof of what Brennan and Sloan had done. Miles Hartwell, Marcus said. He's not the saboteur. He's the whistleblower. Everything inverted in that moment. The crime they'd been investigating wasn't the bathtub destruction. The crime was the systematic embezzlement that had been happening for 5 years. And Miles had risked everything, his reputation, possibly his freedom, to expose it in a way that couldn't be covered up or explained away. Claire's phone rang. It was Sloan. Claire, I need you to come to the 24th floor observation deck. Immediately. Alone. Why? Because if you don't, someone is going to die tonight, and it will be your fault for not listening. The line went dead. Marcus grabbed her arm as she moved toward the door. That's a threat. You're not going up there alone, she said. Alone. And I'm saying no. This woman has been orchestrating a massive fraud. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I'm coming with you. We'll stay out of sight, but I'm not letting you walk into a trap. They took the service stairs up one more level. The observation deck was technically on the 20th floor, a rooftop area that had been converted decades ago into a small enclosed space with windows offering panoramic views of Chicago. It was rarely used now, mostly forgotten by guests who preferred the bar on the 12th floor. The door was unlocked. Claire pushed it open, and cold air rushed in. Someone had opened the rooftop access, and the wind from Lake Michigan screamed through the opening. Sloan Whitaker stood near the railing, her perfect composure completely shattered. Her hair was loose, mascara streaked down her face, and she held a phone in one hand like a weapon. But she wasn't alone. Miles Hartwell was there too, and he looked even worse than Sloan. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt torn, and there was blood on his collar from what looked like a split lip. They'd been fighting, arguing. The confrontation had turned physical. Claire, Sloan said, her voice raw, you need to stop this investigation right now. You need to take that laptop, destroy it, and forget everything you found. I can't do that, Claire said quietly. You know I can't. The Drake will close. Sloan's voice broke on the words, decades of control finally cracking under the weight of inevitable consequences. James Brennan will go to prison, but the hotel will close anyway because the finances are ruined. 300 people lose their jobs. Legacy families who've worked here for generations will have nowhere to go. The Drake is a Chicago landmark, and it will be gone. Because of you. Because you couldn't leave well enough alone. Miles stepped forward, and Claire saw that his hands were shaking. She doesn't understand, he said, and his voice was gentler than Claire expected. She still thinks the fraud is the only crime. She doesn't know what Brennan was planning. Shut up, Sloan hissed. No. Miles turned to face her fully, and Claire saw something in his expression that looked like pity. It's over, Sloan. It's been over since I found that laptop 6 months ago. You can't protect him anymore. You can't protect yourself. What was Brennan planning? Claire asked. Miles pulled a folded document from his pocket, handed it to Claire. It was an insurance policy for the Drake Hotel, $50 million payout in case of catastrophic structural failure or disaster that rendered the building unusable. He was going to destroy it, Miles said. Not financially, physically. Brennan had contractors lined up to create a gas leak that would condemn the building, make it structurally unsound, collect $50 million in insurance, and walk away, while the city tore down the Drake because it wasn't safe. All those employees. He didn't care. He was going to murder the hotel itself. Sloan was crying now. silent tears tracking through her makeup. He said he would call it off. He'd promised me if I helped him with the transfers, kept the books clean, he'd save the Drake. He lied. He was lying the whole time. So you helped Miles expose him, Claire said, understanding flooding through her. You created the alibi, orchestrated the bathtub flood, because you realized Brennan had to be stopped, but you couldn't do it directly without incriminating yourself. I thought I could control it, Sloane whispered. I thought we could expose the contracts, blame everything on Brennan, and I could claim I was coerced, threatened, that I didn't know the full extent of what he was doing. But now there's a laptop with emails that prove I knew everything. I'm going to prison, Claire. I'm going to lose everything. And for what? The Drake is still going to close. Marcus emerged from the stairwell, his presence surprising no one. They'd all known he was there, pretending otherwise. Actually, he said, the Drake might survive this. I've been on the phone with the FBI and the Illinois Attorney General's office while Claire was digging through that laptop. If you testify against Brennan, if you provide full documentation of the fraud, and if the hotel cooperates completely with asset recovery, there's a chance the property can be seized, sold to a legitimate buyer, and continue operating. You'll still face charges, you'll still do time, but the Drake can be saved. And Miles? Claire asked. What happens to him? Mr. Hartwell is a former forensic accountant who was hired by a minority investor in Drake Holdings to audit the books. He discovered the fraud, attempted to report it through legal channels, and was threatened by Brennan. Everything he did, including the rather dramatic method of exposing the ceiling safe, was done to protect evidence and ensure it couldn't be destroyed. He'll probably face charges related to property damage and the fake alibi. But with a good lawyer and full cooperation, he might avoid jail time. Marcus looked at Miles. Though I still think you could have just called the FBI instead of flooding a bathroom. Miles almost smiled. Brennan has connections at every level of law enforcement. If I had gone through normal channels, the evidence would have disappeared before charges could be filed. I needed it exposed publicly, dramatically, in a way that couldn't be covered up. I needed the hotel itself to betray him. The flow switch in the bathtub drain, Claire said, pieces still falling into place. You designed it to trigger when someone ran the water. You knew housekeeping would test the bathroom after cleaning. You knew they'd turn on the faucet to check for leaks or problems. You created a bomb with a guaranteed timer. I miscalculated the pressure surge, Miles admitted. I thought it would crack a pipe, create a slow leak that would seep into the ceiling over hours. I didn't expect the bathtub to split completely. That was ... unfortunate. Claire thought about the hours she'd spent analyzing the damage, the terror of finding the black box, the paranoia of thinking the Drake was under attack. And it had been, just not from the person she'd assumed. You're either brilliant or insane, possibly both. I'm desperate, Miles corrected. James Brennan destroyed my career 4 years ago when I worked for one of his other properties and tried to report financial irregularities. He blacklisted me in the industry, made sure I'd never work as an accountant again. When a minority investor hired me for this audit, I saw a chance for justice. Maybe revenge, maybe both. I don't know anymore. Sloane had sunk to her knees, her phone forgotten on the concrete. What do I do? She asked, and she sounded like a lost child. How do I fix this? You tell the truth, Marcus said. All of it. You testify. You provide every document, every email, every piece of evidence that shows what Brennan did. You help us build a case so airtight that he spends the rest of his life in prison. And maybe, the court shows you mercy for cooperation. Claire looked out at the Chicago skyline, at the lights beginning to glow as evening deepened into night. Somewhere down there, James Brennan was probably having dinner, drinking expensive wine, thinking he'd gotten away with stealing $15 million and planning to destroy a 100-year-old landmark. He didn't know yet that his world was about to collapse. that 3 people on a rooftop had decided his fate. "We need to go," Marcus said gently. "All of us. Downtown. Full statements. This is going to be a very long night." As they walked toward the stairs, Sloane moving like a sleepwalker, Miles limping slightly from whatever altercation had bloodied his mouth, Claire exhausted down to her bones. She thought about the bathtub, broken, destroyed, serving its purpose by breaking. Sometimes things had to shatter completely before the truth hiding beneath them could be revealed. 3 days later, Claire stood in the basement maintenance room, reading the news on her tablet. James Brennan had been arrested at O'Hare Airport trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Sloane Whitaker had been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, but released on bail in exchange for cooperation. Miles Hartwell was being called a hero by some outlets, a vigilante by others, and would face trial for property damage but likely receive probation. The Drake Hotel had been seized by federal authorities and was in the process of being sold to a hospitality group that specialized in historic property renovation. All 283 current employees had been guaranteed their jobs through the transition. The ceiling safe in room 1808 had been removed and was now evidence in what prosecutors were calling one of the largest hospitality fraud cases in Illinois history, and the bathtub in room 1908 had been replaced. The new one was modern acrylic with safety features and emergency shutoffs. It would never break the way the old one had, never expose secrets hidden in the ceiling above, never destroy itself to reveal the truth. Claire thought about that sometimes, about how the old bathtub, in its destruction, had saved the Drake, about how sometimes the only way to save something is to break it first, completely, without reservation, about how lies can look so much like truth until water floods them, cracks them open, forces everyone to see what was always there beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed. Tommy, asking about a minor repair in the West Wing, regular maintenance, normal problems. The kind of work that didn't involve conspiracy or fraud, or federal investigations. Claire smiled and responded that she'd be right there. Then she closed her tablet, pocketed her phone, and went back to work. The Drake Hotel needed her. It always had. But now, for the first time in 5 years, the building she was maintaining wasn't built on lies. The coffee receipt from 3:07 p.m. on that October afternoon remains in evidence file 7A, time-stamped proof that sometimes the most obvious alibi is the biggest lie. And elevator 5, which had stopped on the 24th floor for exactly 90 seconds, carried guests up and down without incident, keeping the secret of how Miles Hartwell had traveled through the building's hidden passages to plant his balm of truth. In the end, the broken bathtub wasn't the crime. It was the confession. The building itself had testified, and everyone who thought they were safe behind polished marble and elegant facades learned that some secrets are too big to stay buried. That water finds every crack. That pressure, when it builds long enough, will eventually shatter even the strongest container. And sometimes, that's exactly what needs to happen. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the lies people tell themselves to justify staying silent, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where exposing the truth meant destroying something you cared about? What did you choose? Subscribe to this channel for more stories that dig beneath the surface of human nature and reveal the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of what happens when people are pushed to their breaking points. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to understand that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Because in life, as in hotels, nothing stays hidden forever. Eventually something breaks, and the truth comes flooding out.